I threw my own son out of my house on the same morning he tried to have me declared incompetent. Then I walked into court with a quiet smile and a flash drive that turned his lawyer the color of chalk. He thought the judge would believe their stories about my confusion, the burned fields, the missing checks, the tractor crash. He was right about one thing, the judge did believe a voice. My sons. Calling me a senile goldmine. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Arthur Hale. I am 68 years old. I am a grandfather, a widower, and the last man standing on a piece of land my family has cut from rock and winter for 4 generations. We call it Hale's Bend, a crooked elbow of pasture swinging around a creek that wanders in slow, brown loops and eats the spring light like a patient animal. I raised my boy on this land. I buried my father and my wife on it. When I am done here, these fields will become me the way dust becomes stone and back again. 3 years ago, my son Daniel and his wife, Melissa, arrived with a car full of plastic totes, designer lamps still in their boxes, and a 1,000-pound smile that did not touch the eyes. Temporary, they promised, because their townhouse, bought just before a market dip, flipped, then flipped again, had turned into a sinkhole. Credit cards. Subscriptions. New phones every fall. We just need a little time to get back on our feet, Daniel said, rubbing the back of his neck like he did when he was 6 and caught stealing cookies. Melissa stood in my kitchen, looking over the old maple table that had hosted every birthday and heartbreak we ever had. We will help with the farm, too, she added, and I wanted so badly to believe her that I ignored the way her eyes measured the room like square footage. There were 3 reasons I said yes. First, Lily, my granddaughter. She was 5 then, with a laugh that could push a whole day back towards sunlight. Second, the memory of my wife, Rose, kneading bread at that table, telling me, family first, Art. Even when they stumble. Third, I had spare rooms and time and the kind of loneliness that makes noise out of a house. The first month was easy. Daniel mended fence lines, even if he did it with more enthusiasm than skill. Melissa cooked exactly twice and ordered takeout for the other nights with an effusive, "Dad, you have to try this place." She insisted Lily call me Grandpa Art like always. We cleared the attic together, Daniel and I, breathing the dust of my mother's quilts and my father's dry laughter. They paid a little toward groceries. We ate on the porch in the evening and watched the deer sample my beans. I pretended not to notice Melissa photographing the place from every angle, always angling the camera away from the rot I had not had the heart to deal with. There were signs. There always are, if you know how to read the edges of a picture. Melissa started calling the farmhouse, the property. She told neighbors in that sparkling tone that manages to sound humble and triumphant at once, "We are staying at my father-in-law's property while we transition." Transition into what, she did not say. She signed for packages with my last name and changed the billing address to mine. "Just one less thing for you to worry about, Dad," she would chirp, tapping her phone. When I asked why my electric bill now arrived under Hale Household LLC, she laughed and said, "Everyone does it that way now. It saves money." Daniel borrowed my truck without asking and returned it with the gas light on. He used my tools and left them where they fell. He forgot Lily at school pickup once and turned it into a joke. He stood in my pasture one afternoon and said, "You know, Dad, this place would fetch a fortune to the right developers," like he was talking about a vintage jacket on a thrift rack. The night the rumor started, the creek was swollen from spring rain, and the smell of wet earth climbed through the screen door like an old friend. Melissa stood at the sink with her phone, her face lit ghost blue. She was warning the neighborhood group online that they had seen an elderly man wandering near the road, confused, almost walking into traffic. "We are worried," she typed, fingers flying. "He needs more supervision." I watched her for a long time before I said, "Bring me my coat." "Why?" she asked. "Because I am going to see if that old man wandered back where he belongs." She did not laugh. She slipped the phone into her pocket and pretended not to see me standing in the doorway, coat in hand, the map of my land crisp in my head like the palm of a hand. The only footprints in the dark were mine. In the morning, my pills were not where I left them. "Probably you moved them and forgot," Melissa said lightly, stirring her quinoa with a wooden spoon that still had my wife's initials burned into the handle. She tracked me with her eyes as if I were an animal being studied. 2 days later, I put my tractor into a ditch. It was not the ditch's fault. Someone had loosened the clamps on the fuel line, and the engine coughed like an old smoker before it died. The front wheels rolled off the low berm and found the buckle of soft ground, and there I sat with the nose down and my heartbeat suddenly a separate animal. I climbed out slow, checked the clamps, tightened them with fingers that know a lie when they touch one. I walked home on the field edge, past the mulberry where Lily and I had made a purple mess last summer and she had called her stained hands proof she was a wizard. I scrubbed mine until the smell of diesel left them. I did not say a word. There is a thing that happens in a house when someone is building a story about you. It is like walking through spider webs that no one else admits are there. Melissa moved sharp things out of reach, for safety. Daniel started finishing my sentences for me and adding the wrong ends. Keys went missing. A small stovetop fire flared in a pan I had not used, one of those quick, flash things that make you feel old because you think, "Did I do that?" And a voice from behind you says, "Well, it happens." The voice makes the mistake into a portrait. I went to my doctor without telling them and asked for a full cognitive workup. He set the papers down after I aced the tests and said, "Art, you could teach algebra in the fog. Be careful who you trust." I started to write everything down. Time I rose. Time I ate. What I took. Where I put it. My father had kept a barn journal that ran for 30 years in his careful block letters, and it was still in the office under a pile of envelopes. I found a blank ledger and started a new book, neat as a survey line. I picked 3 small places in the house and mounted tiny cameras. Not in the bathrooms. Not in Lily's room. In the places where stories become facts, the drawer with my pills, the desk where the mail lands, the cupboard with the deeds and the safe. I told the cameras nothing but the time and a picture. The first video I watched showed Melissa moving my blood pressure pills from the labeled tray to the junk drawer, closing it, stepping back, and taking a photo of the empty tray. In the second, Daniel was opening an envelope from the bank addressed to me, slipping the contents into his pocket, then looking straight at the lens and smiling in that exaggerated, eyes-wide way people do when they pretend to be innocent. In the third, they were in the kitchen after midnight, whispering. "He is almost there," Melissa said, leaning against the counter. "He keeps asking where things are." I told him he had already eaten breakfast today, and he believed me. "That deed," Daniel whispered. "We need him to sign. Power of attorney first. Then we can list in a trust. It will be cleaner. He will not make it to fall without burning down the place. The neighbors already think he is, you know. They think exactly what we told them," she said. "Post more pictures. The one of the stove. That was perfect." I let the videos play. I did not press pause. My thumb ached from grip, and I let it ache. The county social worker came the following week, unannounced. Melissa had made a pot of tea and set out the cookies I buy Lily at the feed store. "We just want what is best for him," she told the woman, placing a hand on my shoulder with theatrical tenderness. "He fell last week by the tractor. He is getting confused. He hides his money everywhere. It is not safe." The worker asked me some questions. I answered in full sentences, like my father taught me. I offered to show her the ledger, the doctor's note. She smiled and said she did not need it yet. She watched Melissa watch me. She saw more than she could say, but she left with a pamphlet about assisted options, and a card for a lawyer who helps families with transitions. 2 days later, Daniel tried to get me to sign in front of a notary he happened to know. It was lunchtime. He set the paper on the table like a magician produces a card, saying the words power of attorney the way you say a prayer that feeds you. I read the first line and then the last. It was the kind of document that sounds like it is for your own good and tastes like sawdust. "You sign," I said, sliding it back, "and I will sign after." He blinked and laughed and held up both hands like he had picked the wrong hat for the rabbit. "We just want to make things easier, Dad," he said. "I know what you want," I said. He stared, then flinched first. He folded the paper. Melissa brought our tea and set it down a little too hard, as if the cup had betrayed her. Here is what I did next. It did not feel like revenge. It felt like mending a fence while the weather holds. I called my lawyer, a woman named Harriet who has carried more farmers through more storms than anyone else I know. She comes from a family like mine. She knows how to read a man's knuckles like a file. She came out on a Wednesday with boots and a yellow pad. We sat with the ledger between us and the camera clips open on her laptop. She spoke without the professional hummed sympathy people give old men. "I wish I could say this is rare," she said finally. "It is not. They are staying here month to month. They pay something toward groceries," I said. "They do not pay rent. I did not ask them to." "Then we will ask them now," she said. "We will ask them to leave." Eviction is an ugly word in a good house, but sometimes you have to clear a field completely to let anything grow again. Harriet drafted a notice that afternoon in her neat, sharp print. 30 days. Cuz stated, interference with finances, medications, property, harassment, defamation. I learned that word in my 20s. I learned it again at 68. We decided to do one of the hardest things a father can do. We decided not to tell Daniel first. We decided to do it right. Before that notice was posted, I did something else that surprised me with its coldness. I moved the house, the barn, and the fields, on paper, into a kind of trust that keeps wolves from the door. I made 2 beneficiaries. The first was me, because I am not dead yet. The second was Lily, who will inherit when I am in the ground. The trust stipulates that the land cannot be sold or split. It can be worked or left wild, leased to a farmer who knows how to listen to soil, or used as a sanctuary for whatever birds feel like nesting here. If Lily decides she wants nothing to do with it when she is grown, the land will go to a conservation group that has never sold a snake to a boy. I left 1 copy of that document unhidden on my desk, and I let a small camera watch it. Melissa found it at midnight. She read it twice. "He is not allowed to do this," she whispered. "Of course he is," Daniel said. "He will not remember in the morning." The notice went up on a Thursday. The deputy who posted it knows my father's name and mine. He did not say anything when he taped it inside the glass of the back door. He just nodded once. I watched through the screen, and my heart did not race the way I had feared it would. Melissa found it first. She screamed Daniel's name like a siren. He came in from the barn at a jog, a piece of baling twine around his wrist like a bracelet. He read the first line. He read it again. "You cannot do this," he said, and at the same time, "How dare you?" and the way the two sentences collided in his mouth told me everything I needed to know about the boy I had raised and the man he had become. "We can talk," I said. "We can hear one another. But you will leave this house." Melissa called her nephew, the one in the paramedic program, and he arrived with his girlfriend and his video phone already rolling, narrating the drama with the breathless outrage of the young. My senility trended for half an hour on a local page that eats people whole and calls it community. The next day, a lawyer called. Their lawyer. He had a city office and a polished voice and the confidence of a man who has never mended fence in sleet. He said words like guardianship and capacity and emergency hearing. "Yes," I said, and stepped onto the pendulum that swings between the people you love and the lawyer who knows exactly what to do. Court was set for Tuesday. There are rooms in this world where people are weighed without being touched. Courtrooms are one of them. Melissa dressed in pale blue and stood close to Daniel so their outline looked like one thing. Lily was with her other grandmother, who believes whatever she is told as long as it is said calmly. Melissa's lawyer went first. He told stories. An old man confused about dates. A small fire. A tractor in a ditch. Pills gone missing. Calls to neighbors. My clients have been trying to keep him safe. They are concerned for their daughter. They are concerned for him. He denies reality. He refuses help. We are asking for temporary guardianship, narrowly tailored, to handle his affairs until he is evaluated. I kept my hands flat on my knees and breathed the way I was taught to breathe when my wife's breath ran out in my arms and I had to decide whether to scream or pick up the phone. Harriet said my name like a benediction. "Mr. Hale," she said. "Would you tell the court how many acres you currently manage?" I told them. She asked about the harvest last year. I described it. She asked about my ledger, and I opened it to the page where the small fire sits between lunch and a call from a neighbor who had seen Melissa at a jeweler. She asked about my doctor, and she handed up the letter he had written after my test. "No cognitive impairment detected, patient is oriented and capable of managing his affairs." Then she touched the laptop in front of her like it was a quiet pet. "Your Honor," she said, "I have evidence to play." Melissa's lawyer objected. Harriet waited, motionless. The judge, who has the kind of face that learned patience as a child, nodded. The first video filled the monitor on the wall. Melissa's hands moving pills. Photographing the empty tray. Putting the pills back hours later and then filming my face as she asked me if I had remembered to take them. The second video showed Daniel taking my bank statements and sliding them into his pocket, then sent a photo of my signature to a number saved as M. title. The third showed them both. Midnight. The kitchen. Their voices holding the exact careful cruelty that tells you a lie has become a path they walk too easily to notice the stones. I did not look at the screen while they played. I watched my son. When he heard himself say senile goldmine, his jaw moved once like he was swallowing a bee. There is a sound a courtroom makes when it realizes it will never believe the wrong story again. It is not loud. It is a collective letting out of something that was held too long. The judge did not lecture. She did not need to. She denied their petition so cleanly it was like cutting rope. Then she turned to the deputy seated behind us. "There is an existing notice," she said, and the deputy nodded once. She looked at me. "Mr. Hale, if you need assistance enforcing it, you will have it." We left the courthouse in a quiet that did not feel empty. Harriet squeezed my shoulder. I stood for a moment by the door and listened to the traffic like a river. Melissa's nephew had posted the verdict before I reached the sidewalk, but his video got fewer hearts than the rumor had. That is how these things go. Truth does not trend. It settles. We drove home. Daniel's car was already there. The notice had been peeled from the glass and torn in half. I found the two pieces on the kitchen counter, laid next to one another like all damage can be undone if you align it carefully. I called the deputy. He came with another notice and two more easy nods. Melissa tried to storm into the barn to collect her belongings. She had a list that included a copper pot that was my wife's and a framed photograph of my father and the old team with their noses fogging the morning. The deputy stood between her and the door and said, "Clothes and personal items only," in the same voice he uses to talk to dogs about not chasing deer. They left 3 hours later. They took suitcases and boxes and the lamp she had never unboxed. They did not take the almond print curtains she loathed. They did not take the smell of the place. They did not take Lily. That last was not mine to control. I waited until the house went quiet and then dialed Daniel. He did not answer. I dialed Melissa. She did, because victory calls people to the front door of their pride. "You cannot keep her from us," she said immediately. "You will never see her again." I wished, in that moment, that I had the kind of anger that feels like a weapon you can hold. Instead, all I had was the picture of Lily in the mulberries, purple grin, a monarch winging past her ear like a folded prayer. "I will not fight you in the street," I said. "I will fight you where it matters." Then I called my lawyer again and asked her to add one more thing to her list, a petition for grandparent visitation on behalf of the child who had not lied to anyone. In the weeks that followed, there were hard days and useful ones. Hard days were mostly evenings, when the house told me the stories it has stored in its wood. Rose humming with her hands in dough. My father whittling something that looked like nothing until suddenly it was a small horse. Daniel as a boy falling asleep at this table with homework stuck to his cheek. Useful days were mornings, where fence can be mended and the chick brooder needs cleaning and the ledger uncaps its pen and says, "Right." People came. The neighbor who had shared Melissa's posts on the neighborhood group brought me a pie and the kind of apology that knows it cannot be enough. The social worker returned with a different posture and a list of people she can no longer trust at face value. The deputy stopped by twice to drink coffee and look out at the fields and not say, "I have daughters." Daniel sent one text after a month. It said, "We need money." It did not say hello. The old man that lives in me replied, "Work," and turned off the phone. The hearing for Lily came, and the judge, another one this time, with different lines drawn on his face by whatever has hurt him, listened to the way I say my granddaughter's name. He listened to Melissa say it like possession. He gave me weekends twice a month and Wednesday afternoons every week, enough time to weave a rope from so many small fibers that it can hold our two hearts even when other hands try to cut it. On my first Wednesday with her, we climbed the mulberry and stained our fingers purple again like we were signing a pact. She asked why her parents were angry. I told her a truth that fits in a child's ear. "They made some bad choices," I said. "Adults do that sometimes. But I love you. That is my choice, and it is always good." She put her forehead against mine and sighed like she believed me. 2 months after the court, I woke at 3 in the morning and did not know why. The house was very still. I got up and walked to the back door and opened it. The night smelled like honeysuckle and distant rain. Out in the darkness, something moved. For a second, the animal mind that lives in all old men who have kept animals thought, fox. Then the porch light caught a face I had kissed in hospitals and Madison Fair rides, and I saw my son standing there without a car and without his wife. He looked smaller. He looked like the boy who fell asleep on algebra. He held his hands out, palms up. A man who has run out of things to carry. "Dad," he said, and his voice scraped on the edges like he had swallowed gravel. I was wrong. In this part of the story, you want the father to fall into his son's arms and let the land itself rejoice. Maybe in some stories, that happens. It did not happen here. I stepped back just enough for the porch to become a line, and then I stepped forward again enough for the line to become a door. He came in. We sat at the table where you cannot lie for long. He cried and tried not to, and then he let himself and became quieter. He said Melissa had left with the nephew who films everything, and the lawyer had found new clients, and he did not have a place to sleep that night. I made coffee because some gestures are the only ones you have left. We sat in that thin hour where the night is almost done with you. He told me the rest of his story in the way a man tells a thing when he has finally decided not to play the hero of it. "I did this," he said. "I wanted out of the grind, and the grind was your face. I wanted more. The house, the fields, the money. I hated the labor that made the money. Melissa made it look easy. Like it could be turned into something. I did not think about Lily. I did not think about you being a person and not a bank. I told myself you would not feel it. I told myself you were almost done anyway and would not notice the last miles. I listened. I did not perform the mercy of interrupting. When he finished, he did not reach for me, which told me some part of him now understood the word consequence. I stood and went to the closet and brought back a folded blanket and a pillow. "You can sleep on the couch," I said. "Tomorrow morning we will work. And in a week you will leave and find your own job and your own bed. There will be a day when you come back and do not carry this like a heavy instrument you can never put down. That day is not now." He nodded. His hands found the blanket like they were remembering something old and boring and good. I slept. The house slept. The land that does not know our small wars slept. In the morning, the light came up pink on the far pasture, and a fox crossed the lower field like a careful brushstroke. Daniel and I mended the northern fence. We said very little, because men who have broken the most important thing sometimes need their words to learn to walk again before they can run. He left on Saturday. He hugged Lily and she cried. He hugged me and I let him. He went to a town where no one knows our last name and took a job unloading crates from trucks in the rain. I know this because he texts me once a week, and the texts are not about money. They are about tired feet and a new respect for sleep and a woman at the diner who reminds him of his mother when she was young because she calls everyone honey and clears empty plates with a grace you do not learn. I do not reply to all of them. I read them out loud sometimes to the empty kitchen and let the house have them. Melissa sent me one thing, a letter that began with a threat and ended with a request. I put it in the ledger, under a page about the first frost, and I wrote no. The farm is not quiet now. Quiet is what you call a thing when you are lonely in it. The farm is itself. The creek looks like coffee in the mornings. The barn swallows have returned and drawn their blue marks on the air. The ledger has grown heavy enough to make its own sound when I open it. On Sundays, Lily and I walk to the hill with the two stones that face the river. One says my father's name. One says Rose. Lily puts a dandelion between them and calls it decorating, and I tell her your grandmother loved yellow because it is the color that never gives up. Sometimes I sit on the porch at dusk and imagine what might have been if I had not written that first note in the ledger, if I had signed the paper and handed over my life to the people who said they were helping. It is not a long imagining. I have fences to walk. The son I raised stands on the far side of a wide place and is learning to cross it with the feet he gets to call his own. The granddaughter I love has purple-stained fingers and knows the names of birds. The woman my son married has moved her talent for stories to another audience. The land is still here, the way the land remains when everything else decides to become something else. I am an old man who keeps a ledger. I record the day Harriet came with her yellow pad, and the day Daniel stood on my porch asking for a bed, and the day the judge leaned forward to listen to a voice that told the truth without looking at its own face. I record the morning I turned the key in the door after they left and felt myself both lighter and more hollow than any house ought to make a man feel. What they wanted from me was everything I am. What I gave them, finally, was the door. That, and a last lesson Daniel will either keep or drop, when the facts are against you, change your life, not the story.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.